Hello, my homies. One smart cat doing something a little bit different. So, over the last couple of days, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the dev team, has released them talking about the upcoming changes and the big patch update that's going to be coming later on in the month. And I decided to put this together to kind of condense it to the important stuff, give my thoughts on some of the stuff that they are saying, and just making it a lot easier to package together and to consume. So that being said, let's go to the first point in the most recent talk that they've had.
And so one of the first changes that y'all are going to be able to see is that victims are now going to start off with a 60-second cooldown on their abilities at the start of a match. This change is brought to you by just us wanting to kind of incentivize stealth play and trying to stop some of the rush meta that we've seen in game.
I mean, that is massive. That is insanely huge. So whenever a match starts, the first 60 seconds of the match, Leland won't be able to shove. Connie won't be able to unlock one of the basement doors to open it and get out. The 60 seconds is a long fucking time, especially whenever you consider that for pretty much the life of this game, victims were able to escape in a little bit more than 60 seconds. Like literally the entire map, and win the game in a little bit more than 60 seconds. And now for the first 60 seconds of the game, none of the victims are going to be able to use their powers. That is a massive, massive change. And going from that point into this next point, what he's going to talk about is it's going to change a lot of the dynamic that happens in the basement. Let's listen to what he has to say about, the fact that Bubba doesn't need to be picked anymore and everything.
Coolest things about this change, though, also is the basement gameplay is going to see a lot of differences after this patch goes live. If you tuned into the last stream, you know that the Leatherface requirement is being lifted. Now, obviously, you can still choose Leatherface and you might start in the basement. But we did see a lot of questions actually from people saying, will that change who starts in the basement? Will another family member be in the basement? And that's not the case. The situation with Leatherface not being required, the game stays the same. So you have an opportunity there where if you so choose, you might bring a different, cast of characters to the family side.
Right. So basically he starts talking about a bunch of stuff that doesn't really matter. What this essentially means is the games don't need Leatherface to start anymore. The family can do whatever they want. They can have, Cook, Johnny, and Sissy or whatever. Everybody's still going to start in their same places that they've always started since this game has came out. So if the family doesn't take a Leatherface, the victims basically have free run of the basement until either a victim opens the door or the family feeds grandpa up to his first level. So massive, massive implications of what's going to be a completely different kind of basement game here. When that comes to the basement, that comes for the rest of the map, the rest of the building, the rest of the house, because those barricades and stuff that Leatherface is able to break, they're still going to exist. So if you don't have a Leatherface and you can't break the barricade, that becomes a spot that the victims can just use over and over and over again. Games are going to start faster now because you don't need a Leatherface, but in certain situations where, depending on how the barricades spawn, there can be situations where you literally cannot get a victim. So how is this all going to work out? I mean, I guess we're just going to have to see. All right. And that brings us up to the next very important change. Check this out.
It brings me to the next point that I've got to make. And it's that noise is now going to start to follow victims for a few seconds. So when you are spamming that toolbox, when you're going through that bone pile, when you're running through bone charms, if you set off a nugget,
there you go.
If you slam a door, those noise pings will follow you for a little bit.
So instead of the noise rings coming from whatever interactive you're doing, the toolbox or running through the bone chains or anything like that, they're actually going to stay on the victim's character model. So if you run through a bone charm, it's not going to stay on the bone charm. It's actually going to follow you through the bone charm and stay on your character model. They are making these changes to emphasize being sneaky. You can still run around and, be a madman, be a victim that doesn't care about anything. But you do have downsides to that now. Rummaging through a toolbox, going through bone charms, anything like that, the sound will literally follow you. Now, does that make sense? Like, realistically? No, of course not. If you hit the bone charms in the real world, the sound would come from the bone charms. But they are trying to make it so that if you want to run around, you can, but there are going to be some drawbacks to it now. So that's going to be something that people are going to have to get used to. All right, next little tidbit is something going for you Johnny mains. Something going against you Johnny mains, I guess, technically.
All right. The next point I have is that victims will now stop leaving footprints for Johnny to follow if they're moving at the slowest pace while crouching, which means if you're crouch walking, Johnny will no longer be able to see footsteps from you when he's using his tracking ability.
So this is a good thing overall, because I have played a lot with Johnny, and typically the only defense whenever Johnny has your footprints is to just keep running. Like, that is your only option. Now, it is a viable option, especially if you are, in the basement or anything. You could just go through a crack and Johnny's not gonna be able to follow you. But now this gives you a separate option. You can, run into a thing of grass and then crouch walk out and, continue running somewhere else. I don't have a huge problem with this because this kind of falls in line with what they're doing with Cook as well. Because if you crouch walk whenever Cook's trying to listen to you, he's also not gonna be able to hear you as long as you're crouch walking. So this is further leaning into wanting victims to be playing sneaky. Now, whether or not you like that as a victim, I mean, that's just kind of the way that the game's going. You can still run around and do whatever you want, but they are trying to incentivize being sneaky. I mean, that's just, with all the changes that they're doing, that's just kind of obvious. All right, next little tidbit is something that teabaggers are going to want to be aware of.
The next thing I have on the docket is that we're actually going to be changing the position of detection at escape gates. So what this means is that once a player has crossed the gate, it will now trigger as they've escaped. This change is to kind of help prevent players from being able to camp and teabag at exits from outside of the gate. We're looking at you, Slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
All right. So as soon as you cross the cow grid, then that's it. You've escaped. So what the big question that this does to me is, what about the perks like rubber boots and stuff like that? Because that perk was supposed to be able to make it so that, Leatherface could run across the cow guard in order to get people who are teabagging and stuff like that. But now, as soon as you cross the gate, that's it. You've already escaped. It kind of sucks because some of those stretch of roads, you are able to get kills there. Like, I've gotten plenty of kills of people who weren't even teabagging or anything. They were just leaving the match. Me and the family were able to get to them before they left the match. Like, it was just an active part of the gameplay. But because so many people want to cross the cattle guard and teabag and just, for whatever reason, spend 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes just fucking standing there so a family member could watch them leave. Because of all of that, we're not going to have that anymore. As soon as you cross the cattle guard, then yeah, that's it. You've escaped. Couple of changes coming to gas station.
Here, let me go into the next thing. Speaking of some changes, we're going to be making some improvements to gas station. We're now going to be changing where the fuse pickup locations are, so they're not going to spawn so close to the fuse box.
Pretty much exactly what she said. This is overall a good thing. And the main reason that why they're doing this, essentially, there's literally a whole bunch of screenshots of where you're able to see the fuse and you're able to see where the fuse needs to go in the same screen. Like, that's the thing you need to get, and that's where you need to put it, in the same screen. So obviously that's just bad, map design, quotations, randomness. They're going to fix that. They're going to make it so that they spawn further away from each other, which is just a good thing balance-wise, because the object and the objective should not be, within just feet of each other. That's kind of obvious. So that's a good change. Next up, a little something about Cook.
We're going to be talking about Cook in this next point. We're changing how his ability charge ticks down. So now the way that it's going to work is that it's going to tick down correctly while being actively used, as opposed to just honing in and focusing in on a victim. And this is to help with Cook's spamming ability, which we saw plenty of, speaking in the subreddit of the Cook has heard you, Cook has heard you.
This is something that I used to do a lot whenever I played Cook. You were able to listen around, and then you would start to get, the crazy static waves, and it would give you the general direction of where somebody's at. That's going to be using your power. And before, it would only really start to drain your power whenever it locked onto somebody and it zoomed in and it highlighted them. Now, even whenever you're just trying to get a general direction, it's going to use pretty much the same amount of power that it did whenever it was locking on. For the sheer fact of how spammy Cook could be, he could lock onto somebody and just have them highlighted for, the entire duration of however much power he had. Yeah, that really sucked. And it was really annoying as a victim, I'm sure. So once again, I don't have a problem with it. Cook mains are gonna have to get used to it. But besides that, I think it's a good change. Here is a little thing about family XP.
And so this is more of a fixing an issue. We fixed an issue where the all victims killed XP event would apply even when all victims had not been killed. So that means that family players will see a slight change in XP at the end of their matches compared to what you've been used to seeing with that change. We just kind of wanted to make mention with that. Just because.
Yeah, they're just fixing a bug that was happening. When all the victims get killed, you get a bonus to XP, as you should. And even when they weren't all being killed, the family was still getting that bonus. Now they're not going to get that bonus. So, I mean, that's just a fix. That's fine. It's nice getting extra XP as family. But if you're getting something you're not supposed to get, then yeah, they should fix that. So I don't see any issue with that. I figured this next part was something good just to throw in as well. This isn't coming in the next patch, but he does talk about the fact that they are going to be changing perks.
I just wanted to touch on that because there are going to be changes coming to perks. We have plans to tune up a lot of our perks in game, but we're kind of putting that all together into one perk-focused patch. A lot of P words, so I hope that the wind screen on my mic is holding out. We want to put together a perk patch where we're going to go through and look at, a variety of either best in slot perks and evaluate those for potential changes.
He goes on for a while. Basically, important information here is they are looking at changing a lot of perks. It's not going to be this patch. It's going to be another big patch where they're just going to do an overhaul of a bunch of perks is what it sounds like. Small tidbit about the patch date.
Another cool thing we could talk about. We have a date for the patch. I'm going to let Sid give this good news.
November 28th.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we need from them. So November 28th is the date of the patch, which is going to be very, very interesting because they've chosen to drop their patch, this big patch, on the same day that Chucky is coming out for Dead by Daylight. I'm sure that my TCM audience doesn't all play Dead by Daylight, but there are, a good number of us that do play Dead by Daylight that also play TCM. I don't know if this was a great idea for them to drop it on the same day as Chucky. I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to be streaming Chucky on the 28th. More directly, I'll be streaming Tiffany on the 28th because she's going to have her skin. And I mean, that's just me personally. If you like TCM better, then enjoy the 28th for TCM. But yeah, I think that was I don't think that was a great patch release day. But hey, you know, at least we have a date. All right. So for this one, that's pretty much it. The whole rest of it, I just skimmed through it. They're basically talking about like some lore stuff and other stuff that's like not in this patch, basically. So it's a bunch of stuff that is kind of like inconsequential. All right. So that's a lot of the big stuff that's going to be coming in on the next patch. It's obviously not everything. I don't think it's everything. They said that they'll have the patch notes a little bit before the 28th, and we'll have to see the full amount of patch notes to actually know everything that's going into it. But this was some of the bigger stuff. So I just wanted to get this out there for anybody who didn't, you know, want to watch the whole thing, or who didn't even know that this was a thing, because I just found this, you know, not too long ago, honestly. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully I see you in another one of my videos, and wee.